The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the dark between three star systems. It was bigger than most cities and held beings from across the galaxy. Today was special. Today was the day when the strongest, fastest, and most skilled beings from dozens of worlds would show what their species could do. Commander Juan walked through the main hall with his small team of humans. He was a tall man with graying hair and calm eyes. Behind him walked Dr. Nari, a woman who studied how bodies moved and worked. She carried a tablet and watched everything with interest. The third human was different. June was only 16 years old. He had messy black hair and wore simple clothes. He looked around with wide eyes like any teenager seeing amazing things for the first time. The other two humans had brought him because he was an exchange student learning about other worlds. "Look at all of them," June whispered to Dr. Nari as they passed a group of tall crystal-like beings. The creatures sparkled under the station's lights. Each one was twice as tall as a human and looked like they were made of living diamonds. "Those are the Velthari," Dr. Nari explained quietly. "They're the strongest beings we know. One of them can lift a small truck with one hand." June nodded but didn't look impressed. He just seemed curious. The main arena was huge. Thousands of seats surrounded a large open space where the competitions would happen. Beings of every shape and size filled the seats. Some looked like giant insects. Others were made of what seemed like living metal. A few floated in special suits filled with gas instead of air. Commander Juan found the human section. It was small compared to other areas. Only about 20 humans had come to watch. Most other species had brought hundreds of supporters. "Welcome, beings of the galaxy," a voice boomed across the arena. The speaker was Ambassador Kreeth, a creature that looked like a walking pile of smooth rocks. "Today, we celebrate the peak of physical achievement from across our great galaxy." The crowd made sounds of excitement. Some roared, others whistled, and a few made clicks and buzzes. "First, let us see the champions of the Velthari," Ambassador Kreeth announced, a crystal being walked to the center of the arena. Its name was Velthari Prime, and it moved like flowing water despite being made of what looked like diamond. The arena floor opened up, and a massive block of metal rose from below. It had to weigh as much as 3 cars. Velthari Prime reached down with one hand and lifted the block over its head. The crowd went wild with cheers. The crystal being held the weight steady for 30 seconds, then gently placed it down. The Bintai metal block made the floor shake when it landed. "Amazing!" shouted beings all around the arena. June watched with interest but didn't cheer. He seemed to be thinking about something. Next came the Mordak champion. These beings looked like large lizards that walked on 2 legs. They had long tails and sharp claws. Their champion was called Mordak Swift, and when it moved fast. Mordak Swift crouched at one end of the arena. At the other end, a target appeared. The distance was about as long as 2 football fields. "Ready," called Ambassador Kreeth. Mordak Swift became a blur. 1 second it was crouching, the next second it was at the target. The sound of its movement came after it had already stopped. It had moved so fast that the air made a loud crack behind it. The crowd cheered even louder. Some beings stamped their feet or tentacles. Others flashed lights from their bodies. "Incredible. Speed," Ambassador Kreeth announced. "Faster than sound itself." More champions came forward. A being made of living water flowed through impossible shapes. A creature covered in fur jumped higher than seemed possible and landed without making any sound. Another being with 6 arms juggled objects while solving math problems in its head. Each demonstration was more amazing than the last. The galaxy's champions were truly incredible. Finally, Ambassador Kreeth turned toward the human section. "And now let us see what the humans have brought us." All eyes turned to Commander Juan. He stood up slowly and walked to the arena's edge. The huge space became quiet. Thousands of alien eyes watched him. Commander Juan looked calm. He spoke, in a clear voice that carried across the arena. "The humans thank you for inviting us to this great event," he said. "We are honored to watch your champions show their amazing abilities." He paused and looked around at all the different beings. "This year we have come only to observe and learn. We will not be competing." A wave of confused sounds spread through the crowd. Clicks, whistles, and roars mixed together as different species tried to understand. "But surely you have brought a champion?" asked Ambassador Kreeth. "Every species shows their best." Commander Juan shook his head. "We prefer to watch this time. We want to see what others can do." Some beings in the crowd made sounds that might have been laughter. Others seemed puzzled. The crystal beings sparkled brighter, which meant they were amused. The lizard-like Mordak flicked their tongues in what looked like confusion. Dr. Nari watched the crowd's reaction with interest. She made notes on her tablet about how different species responded to surprise. June just sat quietly and continued, watching everything. He didn't seem bothered that other beings found humans strange. He was more interested in a group of floating jellyfish-like creatures that glowed different colors. "Very well," said Ambassador Kreeth after a moment. "Humans are welcome to observe. Perhaps next year you will show us what your species can do." The crowd's attention moved away from the humans. More champions came forward to show their skills. A being that looked like a walking tree moved heavy objects with its mind. Creatures that seemed to be made of electricity danced through the air in patterns too fast to follow. Commander Juan returned to his seat. Some aliens near the human section whispered among themselves. They spoke in different languages, but Dr. Nari could understand some of them through her translator. "Why did the humans come if they won't compete?" asked a creature with too many eyes. "Maybe they have no champions," suggested a being covered in scales. "They seem like a weak species." "They build good machines," said another. "But their bodies are not special." Dr. Nari smiled a little when she heard this. She knew something the aliens didn't know. She looked at June, who was now watching a demonstration by beings who could change their shape like liquid. The boy looked completely normal, average height for a human teenager, not especially strong or fast-looking. He wore regular clothes and sneakers that had seen better days. To anyone watching, he seemed like just a regular kid who was out of place among all these amazing champions. But Dr. Nari knew better. She had studied human development for years. She knew what even an ordinary human teenager could do when they needed to. The aliens saw weakness where she saw potential they couldn't imagine. The demonstrations continued for hours. Each species tried to show abilities more amazing than the last. Beings flew without wings, lifted impossible weights, moved faster than eyes could follow, and solved problems that would challenge computers. Through it all, the three humans watched quietly. Commander Juan took mental notes about each species' abilities. Dr. Nari recorded data about how different body types allowed for different skills. And June just watched everything with the quiet interest of a teenager seeing new things. None of the aliens paid much attention to the humans after that. They were just observers now, not competitors, not threats. Just another species that had come to watch their betters perform. As the first day ended, beings from different worlds talked excitedly about what they had seen. They made plans to watch tomorrow's events. They discussed which champions were most impressive. The humans prepared to return to their quarters on the station. As they walked through the corridors, aliens stepped aside politely but didn't seem particularly interested in them. "Tomorrow should be interesting," Commander Juan said quietly to his companions. Dr. Nari nodded. "The endurance trials will be fascinating to observe." June just yawned. It had been a long day of watching and he was tired. He had no idea that soon, very soon, the entire galaxy would learn exactly what humans were capable of, and it would change everything. The third day of the Galactic Athletic Summit started like the others. Beings from across the galaxy filled the arena to watch more amazing displays of strength and speed. The morning competitions had been incredible. A species that looked like giant spiders had climbed walls that seemed impossible to climb. Floating creatures had moved through obstacle courses without touching anything. June sat in the human section eating what looked like a normal sandwich. Dr. Nari was taking notes on her tablet. Commander Juan watched the competitions with his usual calm attention. Then everything changed. A loud alarm suddenly filled the entire station. The sound was so sharp and urgent that beings from every species stopped what they were doing. Red lights began flashing everywhere. "Attention all beings," a mechanical voice announced in dozens of languages. "Station emergency. Solar flare has damaged primary systems. Please remain calm. But the beings in the arena were not calm. Creatures that had seemed so powerful and confident moments before now looked around in fear. The arena's lights flickered on and off. The air felt strange, like it was getting thicker. Commander Juan stood up immediately. His military training made him move fast during emergencies. "Nari, June, stay close," he said. Suddenly, June felt his body become much heavier. The gravity in their section had jumped from normal to almost 3 times stronger. He had to work hard just to stay standing. Around him, other beings were struggling too. The crystal champion HFY Prime was in the arena when the gravity changed. The powerful being that could lift massive weights was now pressed to the floor. Its crystal body, which had looked so graceful before, couldn't move under the crushing weight of the stronger gravity. "Help!" HFY Prime called out, but its voice was weak. Then the gravity changed again. This time it became very light, like being underwater. June felt his feet leave the ground. All around the arena, beings were floating helplessly. They had no idea how to control their movement in the changing conditions. Mordak Swift, the fastest being in the galaxy, tried to run toward the exit. But when the gravity changed from heavy to light, the champion lizard launched into the air and crashed into the ceiling. When gravity became heavy again, Mordak Swift fell hard to the floor and didn't get up. "The station's gravity controls are broken," Dr. Nari shouted over the noise of the alarms. She had to hold on to her seat as the artificial gravity kept changing every few seconds. More problems started happening fast. The air began to smell wrong in some areas. Thick, green gas started leaking from broken pipes in the walls. Some beings began coughing and choking. Others held their breathing organs and tried to get away from the poisonous air. The arena's great dome above them started making cracking sounds. Pieces of metal and glass began falling down. Beings screamed and tried to run, but the changing gravity made it almost impossible to move safely. "The station is breaking apart," Commander Juan said quietly, but June could hear the worry in his voice. Through the arena's windows, they could see sparks and explosions happening in other parts of the station. The solar flare had been stronger than anyone expected. It had damaged almost everything that kept the station working properly. Ambassador Kreeth, the rock-like being who had been hosting the event, tried to speak over the communication system. But the speakers kept cutting in and out. "All beings, please move to evacuation areas. Shuttles will..." The message was too broken to understand. In the arena, panic was spreading. The galaxy's strongest and fastest champions found themselves helpless. Their amazing abilities meant nothing when the environment kept changing in ways they couldn't predict. A group of the spider-like climbers tried to escape by climbing the walls. But when gravity suddenly became very strong, they fell and couldn't get back up. Their bodies were built for climbing in normal conditions, not for dealing with gravity that changed every few seconds. The floating jellyfish creatures that glowed different colors were having the worst time. They needed specific air pressure to stay alive. As the station's life support systems failed, the air pressure kept changing. One by one, the beautiful glowing beings stopped moving and started falling toward the ground. Beings that could change. Their shape like water tried to flow through cracks in the walls to escape, but the toxic gas made them solid and unable to move. They became trapped in shapes they couldn't change. Even the beings made of living electricity were in trouble. The station's power systems were failing, and electrical surges kept running through the walls. Instead of helping them, the wild electricity was hurting them. June watched all this happening around him. The champions that had seemed so amazing and powerful were now helpless. But something strange was happening to him. While other beings panicked and struggled, he found himself staying calm. When the gravity became heavy, June automatically bent his knees and lowered his body to stay balanced. When it became light, he reached for things to hold on to before he started floating. He didn't think about these movements. His body just did them. Dr. Nari noticed this too. While aliens around them fell down or floated helplessly, June was managing to stay in control. He wasn't fighting the changing conditions, he was adapting to them. How is he doing that, she wondered quietly. Commander Juan was also adapting better than the aliens around them. When debris started falling from the ceiling, he automatically moved to positions where he would be protected. When the toxic gas came near them, he covered his nose and mouth without being told to do so. The three humans were not the strongest beings in the arena. They were not the fastest. They couldn't lift massive weights or move faster than sound. But while the galaxy's champions struggled with the chaos, the humans were somehow managing to cope. More emergency announcements came through the broken speakers. Hull breach in sections 7 through 12. Life support failing in residential areas. Evacuation shuttles damaged and cannot launch. Core temperature rising to dangerous levels. Each announcement made the situation sound worse. The station wasn't just damaged. It was dying, and everyone on it might die too. But the worst news came last. Warning. Station core will reach critical temperature in approximately 6 hours. If cooling systems cannot be repaired, station destruction is inevitable. The arena became very quiet except for the sound of alarms and emergency systems. Thousands of beings from dozens of worlds realized they might all die together in space, far from their homes. The galaxy's greatest champions sat or floated helplessly around the arena. Velthari Prime was still pressed to the floor by heavy gravity. Mordak Swift was injured and couldn't run. The other champions were trapped by conditions their specialized bodies couldn't handle. Ambassador Kreeth's voice came through the speakers one more time. All able beings, please report to emergency stations. We need help with repairs and evacuation. Procedures. But when June looked around the arena, he didn't see any able beings. The champions who had seemed so incredible yesterday were now victims of the emergency. Their amazing abilities had become weaknesses when the environment became unpredictable. Commander Juan stood up carefully. The gravity was medium-heavy right now, but it would probably change again soon. We should see if we can help, he said. To Dr. Nari and June, Dr. Nari looked surprised. Us? But we're just observers. We're not champions or emergency workers. Commander Juan looked around at all the struggling alien champions. Then he looked at June, who was still managing to stay, balanced and calm despite everything happening around them. Maybe, Commander Juan said slowly. Being champions isn't what this situation needs. June nodded. He didn't fully understand what the older man meant, but he felt ready to help. The chaos around them was scary, but it wasn't making him panic, like it was affecting the other beings. Something inside him felt familiar about all this unpredictability and danger, like he had experienced situations that prepared him for exactly this kind of problem. He just didn't know yet that his normal, human childhood had been the best possible training for surviving when everything went wrong at once. The day the galaxy learned why humans train from a young age, Commander Juan made a decision that surprised everyone watching. Instead of waiting for the alien champions to recover, he stepped forward into the chaos of the arena. Nari, June, we're going to help with the evacuation, he announced. Dr. Nari looked shocked. But Commander, we're not trained for this kind of emergency. Yes, we are, he said quietly. We just don't know it yet. The gravity changed again, becoming very light. Most beings in the arena started floating helplessly. But Commander Juan pushed off from his seat in a controlled way, using the wall to guide himself toward the exit. His movements looked smooth and natural. June followed without thinking. When his feet left the ground, he automatically reached for handholds and used them to pull himself forward. He moved like someone who had played in low gravity before, even though he never had. Dr. Nari watched both of them move with growing amazement. She had studied human movement for years, but she had never seen anything like this. The two humans were adapting to the changing conditions like they had trained for it their whole lives. She followed them and found that her body also seemed to know what to do. When gravity became heavy, she bent her knees and moved carefully. When it became light, she used walls and furniture to control her direction. It felt natural, like something she had always known how to do. Behind them, alien champions were still struggling. Velthari Prime was making slow progress across the floor, but every gravity change knocked the crystal being down again. The spider-like Climbers were clinging to walls, afraid to move when they couldn't predict what would happen next. The three humans made it to the corridor outside the arena. Here, the emergency was even worse. Toxic green gas was leaking from several pipes. The lights kept going on and off. Debris floated in the air when gravity was light, then crashed down when gravity became heavy. Other beings were trapped in the corridor. A group of the jellyfish-like creatures were pressed against one wall, barely breathing in the wrong kind of air. Several of the lizard-like Mordak were injured and couldn't move. "We need to get them to safety," Dr. Nari said. Commander Juan nodded. He moved toward the injured beings, automatically timing his steps with the gravity changes. When he reached the first injured Mordak, he knelt down to check for wounds. The lizard being looked up at him with surprise. "Human? You should not be here. Too dangerous for weak species." Commander Juan smiled. "Let me worry about that." He carefully lifted the injured being, who was twice his size. The gravity was heavy right now, making the lizard very difficult to carry, but Commander Juan adjusted his stance and kept moving. June was helping the floating jellyfish creatures. They needed special air to breathe, and the station's air was wrong for them. June took off his jacket and used it to make a kind of tent around one of them, creating a small space with better air. He didn't know much about alien biology, but he could see what the problem was and found a simple solution. "How did you know to do that?" Dr. Nari asked as she watched June help the aliens. June shrugged. "It just made sense. They need different air, so I made a different space." Dr. Nari was amazed. The 16-year-old was solving problems that the station's alien emergency teams hadn't thought of, and he was doing it like it was obvious. More humans began arriving from other parts of the station. They had heard the emergency calls and come to help. None of them were champions or soldiers. They were just ordinary people, engineers, teachers, traders, students. But they all moved through the dangerous corridors with the same strange confidence. They avoided falling debris, navigated the changing gravity, and stayed away from the toxic gas clouds. They made it look easy. Ambassador Kreeth appeared in the corridor, moving slowly with the help of a mechanical suit. The rock-like being watched the humans work with growing confusion. "How are they doing this?" Ambassador Kreeth asked Dr. Nari. "Your species showed no special abilities in the competitions. You are not the strongest or fastest. How do you move so well in these conditions?" Dr. Nari was starting to understand something important. She watched June help another group of aliens while automatically adjusting to a gravity change. She watched Commander Juan carry a heavy crystal being through a corridor filled with floating debris. "I think," she said slowly, "we need to talk about what makes humans special." The rescue work continued for hours. Human after human arrived to help. They came from all over the station: mechanics, scientists, diplomats, even children. All of them moved through the dangerous environment like they had trained for exactly this situation. They carried beings much larger than themselves. They fixed broken equipment while floating in zero gravity. They sealed gas leaks while heavy debris fell around them. They worked together without needing detailed plans or commands. The alien champions, when they finally made it to safe areas, watched all this with amazement. These humans who had seemed so ordinary were doing things that should have been impossible for their species. Velthari Prime finally reached a safe area, helped by 2 human engineers. The crystal being looked at them with something like wonder. "You carried me," Velthari Prime said. "I am 3 times your size and made of living diamond. How did you carry me?" One of the engineers, a woman named Min, wiped sweat from her face. "You needed help, so we helped. That's what you do in emergencies. But your species has no special strength," Velthari Prime insisted. Min looked confused. "Special strength? We just used teamwork and physics. When gravity was light, we could move you easier. When it was heavy, we used leverage and took turns." The crystal being stared at her. The human had just described using multiple complex concepts at the same time: timing, physics, cooperation, and adaptation. She had done it all automatically, without even thinking it was unusual. In another part of the safe area, Mordak Swift was talking to June. the fastest being in the galaxy, was trying to understand how a human teenager had rescued several aliens while moving through conditions that had defeated a champion. "You moved through the corridor when gravity kept changing," Mordak Swift said. "You avoided the gas clouds and falling debris. You helped others while doing it." "How?" June thought. "About it? Well, I played soccer back home. You have to watch the ball and other players in the field all at the same time. And I do rock climbing sometimes, so you learn to grab things and move your weight around. Plus, video games teach you to react to stuff happening fast." Mordak Swift's tongue flicked out in confusion. "Soccer? Rock climbing? Video games? These are training methods?" "Training?" June laughed. "No, they're just fun things to do. Everyone does stuff like that." The alien champion stared at him. What the human called fun things sounded like advanced military training to Mordak Swift. Multiple skills used together: rapid adaptation, physical challenges, and quick decision-making under pressure. Dr. Nari was listening to these conversations while helping coordinate the rescue efforts. She was beginning to understand something that would change how the galaxy thought about humans. What the aliens saw as miraculous abilities were just normal human capabilities. Every human child grew up dealing with change, uncertainty, and complex challenges. They called it childhood, but it was actually the most comprehensive survival training program in the galaxy. The alien species had evolved on stable worlds with predictable conditions. They had become specialists, incredibly good at one thing. But humans had evolved on a chaotic world that constantly changed. They had become generalists, pretty good at everything, and when everything went wrong at once, generalists survived while specialists failed. "Commander?" Dr. Nari called to Juan, who was helping set up a temporary shelter for injured aliens. "I think I understand what's happening here." Commander Juan looked around at all the humans working calmly in the emergency. He saw ordinary people doing extraordinary things like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think I do too." The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't any single amazing ability. It was their capacity to adapt to anything, anytime, all the time. And they had learned that strength by simply growing up human on planet Earth. The rescue operations were working, but the alien observers were getting more confused by the hour. They watched humans do things that should have been impossible for such an apparently weak species. Ambassador Kreeth gathered several species, leaders in a temporary command center. The rock-like being's voice was full of confusion. "I do not understand what we are seeing," Ambassador Kreeth said. "These humans move through conditions that defeat our champions. They solve problems our specialists cannot handle." "How?" Velthari Prime was there, still recovering from being trapped by gravity changes. "The human female who helped me, she used concepts I studied for years. Physics, engineering, timing, cooperation. But she used them all together, without thinking. Like it was natural." Mordak Swift flicked his tongue nervously. "The human child told me his abilities come from games and sports. But these sound like advanced military training to me." Dr. Nari heard them talking and walked over. She had been thinking about this for hours now, watching her own species work in ways she had never really noticed before. "May I explain something? To you?" she asked the alien leaders. They all turned to look at her with their different kinds of eyes, crystal faces, reptilian heads, rock-like features. "Please," said Ambassador Kreeth. "We need to understand what is happening." Dr. Nari looked around at the rescue operations still going on. Humans were working everywhere, doing difficult jobs in dangerous conditions. They made it look easy, but she was beginning to understand why. "You think what you're seeing is special," she began. "But for humans, this is normal. What you call amazing abilities, we call basic life skills." The aliens looked at each other with confusion. "Let me tell you about human childhood," Dr. Nari continued. "From the time we are very small, human children live in what you would consider extreme training conditions." She pointed to June, who was helping fix a broken air filter, while balancing on floating debris. "June told you he plays soccer. Do you know what soccer is? It's a game where you run around a field while conditions constantly change. The ball moves unpredictably. Other players move in ways you can't predict. The weather changes. The field has different textures. You have to adapt your strategy every few seconds. Mordak Swift's eyes widened. That sounds like combat training. To you, maybe. To us, it's just a game that children play for fun, but it teaches rapid adaptation, spatial awareness, teamwork, and decision-making under pressure. Dr. Nari walked over to where Commander Juan was helping move heavy equipment. Commander Juan probably played similar games as a child. Maybe he also went hiking in mountains where the ground changes under your feet. The air pressure changes and the weather can turn dangerous quickly. Maybe he went swimming, where you have to function in a completely different environment with different physics. The alien leaders followed her, listening carefully. And climbing, Dr. Nari continued, pointing to a human engineer who was fixing something on the ceiling while gravity fluctuated. Human children climb trees, rocks, playground equipment. They learn to judge distances, test their grip, shift their weight, and adapt when conditions change. What you see as impossible skill, we see as basic childhood experience. Ambassador Kreeth made a sound like grinding stones. You are saying human children regularly experience conditions that would challenge our adult specialists? Not just experience, Dr. Nari said. We require it. Human children who don't learn to adapt to changing conditions don't survive to become adults. Our world is unpredictable, so we must be adaptable. She led them to where several humans were working together to solve a complex problem with the station's power systems. Look at them work, she said. They don't have one leader giving orders. They don't each do one specialized task. They communicate, adapt their roles, share information, and change their approach as new problems appear. You know what taught them to do this? The aliens waited. School, Dr. Nari said simply. Human education is chaos. Different subjects, different teachers, different rooms, different schedules, different rules, social pressure from other students, competition and cooperation at the same time, constant testing and evaluation, problems that have multiple solutions or no good solutions. Velthori Prime's crystal face somehow looked shocked. Your children live in constant unpredictability? It gets worse, Dr. Nari said with a small smile. They also play video games that require split-second decisions and rapid learning. They participate in sports with complex changing rules. They navigate social situations more complicated than most diplomatic negotiations. They deal with family problems, school stress, and physical changes in their own bodies. And you consider this normal? Asked Mordak Swift. We consider it necessary, Dr. Nari replied. Because our world doesn't stay the same. Weather changes, geography changes, technology changes, social rules change, political situations change. If you can't adapt to change, you can't survive as a human. The alien leaders were quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, Ambassador Kreeth spoke. Are you telling us that every human child goes through training that would challenge our best warriors? I'm telling you that what you call training, we call growing up, Dr. Nari said. Every human adult has survived 16 or more years of constant adaptation to changing conditions. Every human has learned to function when they don't know what will happen next. She gestured toward the ongoing rescue operations. Your champions. Our specialists. They're incredibly good at one thing in predictable conditions. But when conditions become unpredictable, specialists fail. Generalists survive. And humans are generalists, Velthari Prime said slowly. We're the ultimate generalists. Dr. Nari confirmed. We had to be. Our planet taught us that specialization is a luxury we couldn't afford. So we learned to be good enough at everything to handle whatever came next. Commander Juan joined the conversation, overhearing the last part. Dr. Nari is being modest, he said. What she's not telling you is that human childhood isn't just about adapting to change. It's about thriving in chaos. Human children don't just survive unpredictable conditions, they enjoy them. Enjoy them? Ambassador Kreeth sounded disbelieving. Commander Juan nodded. Humans seek out challenge and change. We call it fun. We create games that are harder than they need to be. We climb mountains we don't need to climb. We play sports that are more complicated than necessary. We solve puzzles just because they're difficult. We don't just adapt to chaos, Dr. Nari added. We get bored without it. A human who lives in completely predictable conditions becomes unhappy. We need challenge and change to feel alive. The alien leaders looked around at the humans working in the emergency. They saw beings who were not just coping with the crisis but seemed energized by it. The humans were working harder and more efficiently than anyone else, and many of them appeared to be enjoying the challenge. This explains much, said Velthari Prime quietly. Why your species succeeded in space when you have no obvious advantages. Why you adapt to new worlds so easily. Why you work well with so many different species. And why our champions failed when conditions became unpredictable, added Mordak Swift. Dr. Nari nodded. Your species evolved for stability. You became incredibly good at specific things. But humans evolved for instability. We became pretty good at everything all the time. The galaxy needs both types, Commander Juan said diplomatically. Your specialist can achieve things we never could. But when everything goes wrong at once, generalists save the day. Finished. Ambassador Kreeth. They stood in silence for a moment, watching June help a group of aliens solve a problem with the environmental controls. The teenager was using knowledge from several different fields, adapting his approach as he learned new information, and teaching others as he worked. To the aliens, it looked like genius-level problem-solving under extreme pressure. To the humans, it looked like a normal kid figuring things out. We have underestimated your species greatly, Ambassador Kreeth said finally. Dr. Nari shook her head. You evaluated us correctly. We're not the strongest, fastest, or smartest species, we're just the most adaptable. And today, adaptability was what everyone needed. The revelation was spreading through the station as more aliens witnessed human capabilities. The galaxy's understanding of humanity was changing completely, but the humans themselves still didn't think they were doing anything special. They were just helping out during an emergency, the way any decent person would do. That, more than anything else, impressed the aliens most of all. The day the galaxy learned why humans train from a young age. 6 hours after the emergency began, Nexus Prime Station was finally safe. The humans had fixed enough critical systems to stop the station from exploding. Temporary repairs were holding. Everyone who had been trapped was now in secure areas with proper air and gravity. The final evacuation shuttle arrived to take people to nearby safe stations. But as beings from across the galaxy prepared to leave, something had changed forever. The way they looked at humans was completely different now. Commander Juan stood in the main docking bay helping coordinate the evacuation. He looked tired but satisfied. His small team of humans had helped save thousands of lives. To him it felt like they had just done what anyone would do in an emergency. Velthari Prime approached him, moving slowly. The crystal being's body still showed damage from being crushed by the gravity changes. Commander Juan, Velthari Prime said formally, my species owes yours a debt that can never be repaid. Commander Juan looked surprised. A debt? We just helped out. That's what neighbors do. Neighbors, Velthari Prime repeated the word slowly. Yes. We understand now. Humans see all other beings as neighbors who might need help. Dr. Nari was nearby, still taking notes about everything that had happened. She had documented how humans responded to the crisis, and her findings would change how the galaxy understood Earth's species. Mordak Swift approached their group, moving carefully on an injured leg. Dr. Nari, I have a request. My species would like to send young ones to learn from human children. Dr. Nari looked confused. Learn what? Our children just play games and go to school. Exactly, said Mordak Swift. We want our young to learn how to play games that prepare them for anything. We want them to experience the training you call childhood. Similar conversations were happening all around the docking bay. Alien leaders were talking to any human they could find, asking questions about Earth culture, human education, and how human children learn to be so adaptable, Ambassador Creeth made an announcement over the station's communication system. Attention all beings. Before we depart, the Galactic Council wishes to make a formal statement about the events of the past day. Everyone stopped what they were doing to listen. For 3 days, we celebrated the peak achievements of specialized champions from across the galaxy. We marveled at incredible strength, speed, and unique abilities. We believed these represented the highest forms of physical and mental development. The ambassador paused. Today we learned that specialization, while impressive, can also be a weakness. When faced with unpredictable conditions, our greatest champions became helpless. But ordinary humans, not their champions, just regular people, saved us all. June was standing with his 2 companions, still not really understanding what all the fuss was about. To him, the day had been exciting but not particularly difficult. He had just helped people who needed help. We now understand, Ambassador Creeth continued, that humans possess something more valuable than any single amazing ability. They possess adaptability. They can function when conditions change. They can solve new problems. They can work together. Under pressure. They can thrive in chaos. The announcement was being broadcast across the galaxy. On hundreds of worlds, beings were learning about what had happened on Nexus Prime. The Galactic Council formally recognizes that human childhood development represents the most advanced survival training program known to our civilization. What humans call play, we now understand to be comprehensive preparation for unpredictable challenges. Dr. Nari whispered to Commander Juan. They're making it sound more dramatic than it really is. Commander Juan smiled. Let them. Maybe it will help other species appreciate what they already have. The announcement continued. Effective immediately, the Galactic Council will establish exchange programs with Earth to study human development methods. We will also create new training centers based on human childhood principles. This surprised the humans. They had never thought of their childhoods as something other species would want to copy. Ambassador Creeth concluded, Today, the galaxy learned that true strength is not about being perfect at one thing. True strength is about being ready for anything. Humans have this strength because their world taught them that change is the only constant. As the announcement ended, individual conversations resumed around the docking bay. A group of the spider-like climbers approached June. Their leader spoke in a clicking language that his translator converted to words. Young human, would you teach our children your games? The ones that taught you to move in changing conditions? June scratched his head. I guess. I mean, soccer is pretty easy to learn, and rock climbing is fun once you get the hang of it. The spider beings clicked excitedly among themselves. What sounded like simple games to June represented advanced training techniques to them. An hour later, the first evacuation shuttle was ready to depart. But many aliens didn't want to leave yet. They had more questions about human culture and development. Dr. Nari found herself surrounded by scientists from different species, all wanting to understand human adaptability. How do human children learn to be comfortable with uncertainty? Asked one. Do you have special methods for teaching rapid decision-making? Asked another. What is the optimal level of chaos for development? Asked a third. Dr. Nari tried to answer their questions, but she realized how difficult it was to explain something that seemed natural to humans. We don't really teach these things directly, she said. Children just learn by living. They play with other children, which teaches cooperation and competition. They explore their environment, which teaches problem solving. They face challenges appropriate to their age, which builds confidence. But how do you control the variables? Asked an alien scientist. We don't, Dr. Nari said simply. That's the point. Real life doesn't have controlled variables. So we let children experience real life in safe ways. This concept seemed revolutionary to beings from worlds where children grew up in carefully controlled, predictable environments. Commander. Juan was having his own conversation with military leaders from several species. Your soldiers, said a general equivalent from the crystalline species. They would be valuable in unpredictable combat situations. Our soldiers? Commander Juan looked confused. The people who helped today weren't soldiers. They were engineers, Teachers, students, traders, just regular humans. Regular humans, the alien general repeated slowly. Your entire species has military-level adaptability training. We just call it growing up, Commander Juan said. As the evacuation continued, patterns emerged in the conversations. Every alien species was realizing that their specialized development had blind spots. They were incredible at what they did, best but vulnerable when conditions changed. Meanwhile, humans were pretty good at lots of things which made them valuable when nobody knew what would happen next. On the last shuttle to depart, June sat next to Velthari Prime. The crystal being was looking out the window at Nexus Prime Station, which now had ugly but functional repair patches all over it. "June," Velthari Prime said, "may I ask you something?" "Sure," June replied. "Today you saved many lives. You solved problems that defeated our best minds. You adapted to conditions that paralyzed our champions. How does this make you feel?" June thought about it for a moment. "I guess, normal. I mean, people needed help, so we helped. That's just what you do, right?" Velthari Prime was quiet for a long time. Finally, the crystal being said, "Yes, that is just what you do, and that, perhaps, is what makes humans truly special." The shuttle left Nexus Prime behind and headed toward the nearest inhabited system. But the events of that day would spread across the galaxy much faster than any ship could travel. Within weeks, the first human development centers opened on 3 different worlds. Alien children began learning to play soccer, to climb rocks, to solve puzzles, and to work together in unpredictable situations. Some species started redesigning their education systems to include more uncertainty and challenge. Others began questioning whether their focus on specialization was limiting their potential. But the humans involved in the incident just went back to their normal lives. They had jobs to do, places to go, and people to see. They remained largely unaware that they had changed how an entire galaxy thought about strength, adaptation, and what it meant to be truly prepared for life. Commander Juan returned to his diplomatic duties. Dr. Nari published papers about human adaptability that became required reading across the galaxy, and June went back to school, where he continued his comprehensive survival training, also known as being a normal teenager. The galaxy had learned that specialization could be a weakness, and that the ability to adapt was more valuable than any single talent. But most importantly, they had learned that true strength came not from being perfect, but from being ready for whatever came next. And on planet Earth, millions of human children continued their training by simply playing, learning, and growing up, preparing for a future where the only certainty was uncertainty itself.